First, though, the Lakers blew out the Warriors last night, but as the trade deadline approaches, are there roster tweaks coming? I asked LeBron about what it's like to live through trade season last night. Take a listen to what he had to say.
Teams are always just trying to figure out a way how to get better, especially the ones that believe they can make a run for a championship. So that's the way it's always been not always, but for the last, 5 to 7 years, 10 years of my career with the trade deadline and the buyouts and things of that nature. So it's 10 days. There's going to happen really fast, so we see what happens over the next 10 days.
So, Dave, look, it's changed. When he said, for the last 5 or 10 years, when LeBron started trade season, transactions were not as crazy, but they are crazy now.
Yes,
so who are the top trade and buyout candidates for the Lakers as we approach this March 25th deadline?
Well, I'll start by saying, based on the Lakers roster construction and where they're going to be at salary cap wise, it's going to be most likely buyout candidates over trade targets for the Lakers, because if they were to do away with some of their young talent in order to pursue a trade, they're going to be in a tough situation this summer moving forward. But let's start with 3 names. Andre Drummond of the Cleveland Cavaliers, who's been parked on the bench for about a month now as they try to pursue trade targets. And I'm hearing that the Cavs are receiving interest in them, but because he has such a high salary number, it's going to probably be tough for them. Perhaps need a 3-team scenario in order to get that trade. Otherwise, it would be a buyout. Let's go to J.J. Redick of the Pelicans, whose shooting percentage is down a little bit this year, only shooting 36% from 3, but he's one of the true pure shooters in the game, and someone, at this stage of his career, trying to get that championship. Last year was the first year of his career he missed the playoffs. And we don't know how much time he has left, and we'll see if he gets dislodged from the Pelicans, because he is not one of those guys that's been parked yet like some of these other guys. The other guy, PJ Tucker, who was such a vital piece on those Houston Rockets teams that knocked on the door of making the finals and upsetting the Golden State Warriors. Toughness, grit, corner 3-point shooting, playoff experience, and there's going to be a bunch of suitors for him as well. There already are. The Rockets are receiving a lot of interest. Those are the names I would start with at the top of the Lakers list.
Yeah, Tucker is going to be a trade, not a buyout for sure. As Dave points out, there's lots of interest. The name that I like there is Andre Drummond. I think Andre Drummond has become underrated because he's been sort of pigeonholed as this empty stat stuffer guy, empty calorie stats. And I think some of that criticism has been fair at times, but the stats have meaning. It's not just the points and rebounds. He gets a ton of steals for a center, which is really valuable. And if you put a guy like that with LeBron James, he's going to look 20% better immediately, rolling to the rim, dunking, getting offensive rebounds. He's the kind of vertical threat that LeBron really likes that they do not have this year with Marc Gasol and Montrezl Harrell as their centers. I think he'd be great for the Lakers. And I agree with Dave. I think the Cavs could make an Andre Drummond trade right now. I just don't think it's a trade that they particularly want to make. I don't think they've gotten an offer that is to their liking. I think it's more bad money coming back to them, not all an asset. So if it gets to buyout territory, I really like the Andre Drummond fit with the Lakers. I think he's become underrated.
I agree. And look, the Lakers need a dynamic roller and a shot blocker. And if they can't get Andre Drummond, I would look into bringing back JaVale McGee. LeBron James and the rest of some of the Lakers are very familiar with him. He's familiar with the organization. He's what they're missing in that centerpiece. We all know that LeBron loves spacing. He would love to have a guy like J.J. Redick. And I know J.J. Redick's shooting percentage is down, but sometimes a change of scenery will change that. And knowing that he's playing on a contender, because KCP hasn't been consistent this year, and we know that he elevated his game last year, but just having a guy like J.J. Redick on the court, even if he don't touch the ball, is a huge decoy and can open up the paint for LeBron James, Anthony Davis when he comes back, and Dennis Schroeder going downhill, because now the paint is wide open. You have a dynamic roller. If you could add a guy like JaVale McGee, low risk for high reward, you won't have to pay him much because he'll be on the vet minimum if the Cavs buy him out.
Yeah, Parker, certainly JaVale McGee is someone who was well-liked in the Lakers organization, was one of those bodyguards along with Dwight Howard protecting Anthony Davis in his first year with the Lakers. Because they traded him to Cleveland, JaVale will actually have to end up being on another roster first before he could end up on the Lakers and be waived. Of course, the Cavs front office have been very active ever since Kobe Altman took over, and so it wouldn't surprise me if they were to work out some sort of deal to move him. And certainly Jared Allen is the center of the future with that organization. But there is, another hurdle for them to jump over to be able to eventually grab McGee if he is.
Well, Dave, Dave, they know how to make things happen and make things work. It's not hard to get a third team involved and say, hey, we're going to trade JaVale. All you have to do is cut him, and then the Lakers go pick him right back up. I went through that when I was in Oklahoma City.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I want to look even further ahead because Dave mentioned at the start of this that they can't make a move at the deadline that is going to mess them up for this summer, right? And here are the notable free agents for the Lakers after this season. The biggest question mark, of course, Dennis Schroeder, who was traded to L.A. just for this season. Dave, what do the Lakers hope to do with him?
I mean, there's already been discussions, Rachel, between his representative, Alex Taratzis, and the Lakers about trying to find an extension for, a 27-year-old bright young point guard, someone who is ascending at the same age range as Anthony Davis, some guy who plays on both ends. But the question mark for the Lakers is, do you want to risk going to free agency and potentially losing him?
Right.
Or the other risk is paying him beforehand to lock him up, but then what if he doesn't perform in the playoffs the way you hope to? And now you are tied to this player. I mean, it reminds me of the situation a couple years ago with the Milwaukee Bucks and Eric Bledsoe. Bledsoe, it was good for Milwaukee in terms of getting him at a market value that was perceived lower than what he could have gotten if he went to free agency. But then he didn't have a strong postseason, and he is no longer a Buck. That could be the worst case scenario for the Lakers if they do go forward. But, all things considered, Brian Windhorst wrote a really good story a couple weeks ago about what the Lakers' salary cap situation could look like with luxury tax. If they can get a discount on Schroeder by signing him now versus having him taste the waters in free agency, that could be the best bet when it comes to the wallet.
Yeah, to me, there's a distinction between Dennis Schroeder and Eric Bledsoe. Dennis Schroeder's been in the playoffs a lot, and he's not shown any of that sort of volatility. Like, he's the same guy in the playoffs he is in the regular season, which is a good, solid player. I don't think you have to worry about him underperforming in the playoffs. And like Dave said, you don't make a trade for Dennis Schroeder when you have LeBron James nearing the end of his prime, if not past the end of his prime, really. Anthony Davis, your title window is now. You trade for him to bring him back. To me, the complicated questions are Talen Horton-Tucker and Alex Caruso in a market with way more cap space than star players or even sort of sub-star players. Those guys are good, and they're going to get a lot of interest, and Talen Horton-Tucker has solidified himself right now as a key member of the Lakers rotation. They've even played about point guard here or there the last couple of games with guys missing. I think those guys, when you look at their tax situation, and look, no one's going to cry for the Buss family about the tax bill and all that, but let's be realistic. If they have to pay a lot for Schroeder, which they will, I think one of those guys may be on a different team next year. We'll see.
I know one thing. Look, they call Dennis Schroeder Dennis the Menace for a reason. He is a problem on the court. He is one of the few guys that pick up 94 feet defensively. LeBron James loved his tenacity. He loved the edge and the spirit that he plays with. And last year, I mean, he was the runner-up for Sixth Man of the Year, averaging almost 20 points a game. So he's still in his prime. He's going to be in his prime in the next 5 years, still for the next 5 years. I think the Lakers get something done and get something done early. You don't want him to hit the free agency market. For us, Talen Horton-Tucker, I think the Lakers got to do everything in their power to keep him. I know everyone around the league loves this kid. His ceiling is very, very high. Sadly to say, but Alex Caruso, who is a fan favorite, he's one of my favorite. He's probably going to walk. But you got to do everything in your power, if I'm the Los Angeles Lakers, to lock in Dennis Schroeder and keep Talen Horton-Tucker. He's a young stud, and his future is very, very bright.
Yeah, in fact, the Lakers love Talen Horton-Tucker. He's a guy who they were basically able to discover in the draft. He didn't even do a private workout for the Lakers. They bought a pick from the Magic, be able to get him in the second round. Last year, played sparingly. Last night was only his 41st game of his career. He puts up 18 points, 10 assists. Kyle Kuzma said he's probably the second or third best player on our team at driving and getting into the paint, and he has the know-withal to be able to find open shooters, or he can finish with both hands around the rim, the long length, bright, young work ethic, just a guy they love and they'd love to lock up.
Yeah, and look, we didn't talk about that much about the Laker game from last night. Obviously, it turned into a blowout. But just for the people, Dave, what did Kyle Kuzma say happened to him on that technical free throw where he shot an air ball?
There's an earthquake. There's an earthquake.
There you go.
Watch out,
so
everybody.
apparently that's an explanation if you want to know about the notable thing that happened in that game. Hey, it's, what are you going to do? Dave, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to
we
see
can
you.
do the local news later if we want to. We'll be working on that here in this studio. I'm so happy to have people in the studio. Director Kathy's going to have to deal with me all music. This is excellent. Robert, explain to the people how impressive this is at age 36 years old.
The fact that he's 36 is amazing, but look at the years he's been in the NBA, and he's still doing it at a high clip. And this is what people got to understand. He's been in the league for 40 years, and he's still playing like this, man. Come on, LeBron's just amazing.
I don't know what language you put on that ball, but that's more than English, I tell you that.
Welcome to The Jump. I'm Rachel Nichols. I'm alongside Coach David Fizdale and our 7-time champion, Robert Horry. Never gets old, no matter how many times I say it. Never gets old. Do you just do every restaurant you walk into and they're like, what name, sir? And you're like, 7-time champ, Robert Horry? No?
Hey, I do that. That's a 7 champ or big shot. Take your pick. I'm in there somewhere.
It's a free meal there.
Yesterday, you announced that you are graduating from the University of Alabama
Absolutely,
in May, where you, of course, play college ball. What motivated you to go back to school?
I always had this desire to coach, and I want to coach on the college level someday. And you can't coach without a degree. And watching my son, who's 15-year-old Christian, he's getting ready to go to college soon. And I said, wouldn't that be great if I was able to coach him in college? And he looked at me like, no, because you coached our AAU team. No, I don't want you coaching. So I'm just doing it for him. My mom is going to be proud. So,
absolutely.
I'm doing
As
it
she
for
should
myself.
be.
Yeah, the thing is, I was so close to graduating. When I got drafted in the NBA, I was like, I'm making money now. What I need to go back for? But now I see why.
Right. It's bigger than you, right?
Yeah.
Man, you're an inspiration, Rob, and I just think that even more so, all of us, what we could take a page out of is you never stop learning.
Absolutely.
And I really, really admire that you could put your ego to the side and say, I'm going back to school
Right.
and finish. And I think for your son, it's a great example. And I hope you get to do that.
Thanks.
I really do.
Listen to the teacher, do homework.
Oh, I'm in a finance class right now, and I'm scratching my head every day like, huh? What?
But useful, right?
Yes,
That's
very
gonna be
useful. Yes.
useful
Awesome,
as you continue on. As Biz says, never stop learning. All right, guys, you can learn a little bit on the show today. Coming up, we're going to talk a little bit about the defending Eastern Conference champs. They've won 11 of their last 12 games. Is this hot streak a blip or a trend for Miami? We'll discuss that later in the show. First, though, we take it to Portland, where the Pelicans dominated the Blazers for the first 42 minutes of the game. But you know what? The game is longer than 42 minutes. New Orleans built up a 17-point lead. 5 minutes and 56 seconds left in the fourth quarter, according to ESPN Stats and Info. Entering last night, teams were 236-0 with a 17-point-plus lead and under 6 minutes to go this season. And that's when the latest episode of Dame Time started. Damian Lillard outscored the Pelicans 15-9 from that point on to lead Portland to a miraculous comeback win. Lillard sealed the 1-point win by hitting 2 free throws with 1.2 seconds to play. Now, after the game, Lillard talked about why he's able to rise to any challenge. I loved listening to this.
So in those moments, I just get more aggressive. I seek things out and I try to go after it. Instead of taking a step back, I take a step forward and then another step forward to try to impose myself as opposed to, playing it safe and worrying about what could go wrong. Once that moment comes, I'm like, if it goes wrong, I'm willing to take that blame. I'm willing to shoulder whatever somebody got to say about it. And if it goes well, let's go back to work and do it again the next time it happens. So that's kind of my mentality. Instead of tightening up, I get more aggressive and, I go for it in those situations.
Do not be afraid to try, the man said. Also had a great sermon on work last night. He was preaching. Now, dating back to when he entered the league in 2012-2013 season, Dame has scored by far the most points to tie or take the lead in the final minute of a game. So, Robert, one clutch man to another. Is Damian Lillard building a case to be on the NBA Mount Rushmore of clutchness?
Of course. This dude has hit a clutch shot versus every team in the NBA. He might be the only guy that's ever done that.
Yep.
So you got to think about that. Every team. There's a lot of teams
That's
in
a
the NBA.
lot of
Like
teams.
4 or 5. And the thing about Damian Lillard, when he comes on this court, you are afraid of this man because at the end of the game, we all know who's going to take the shot, but you don't know where he's going to take that shot from. Going to the free throw line, making 2 clutch like in this game, or shooting it from half court like he did on the.
Yeah.
You know, it's so many things he can do.
I think the ability to quiet your mind in that moment is really it's an innate skill. He had it, you know, Dame has it. Joe Johnson, who I coached, was a killer in those moments. It's a lot of guys who just has this innate ability to quiet their mind, to block everything out, to not worry about what might happen if I don't make this shot. What I always ask, and you can answer this, is it tougher on the guy that knows he gets to take that shot and is always going to take that shot no matter what?
Right.
Or is it tougher on the guy that's waiting to receive and doesn't know when that shot is coming or if that ball is going to bounce to him? Big Shot, I always envy your position in this. I'm asking you, as I don't know when I'm going to get this chance, do you think that's a tougher position?
You know, it all deals with your makeup. Do you want that shot? We all as kids do that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 on the playground, but do you really want it when the lights are bright and everybody's watching? So for me, I've always wanted that shot, you know, and I played on teams where I wasn't the first option, but I was the second option. And in my mind, I am the first option because every team is going to shut down that second option. So it built up my confidence. When we want to peacock, I'm going to put my tail feathers out and flap them something. So for me, I was just happy to be in that moment because I knew I was about to step up for my team.
And your teammates knew.
Oh, they know. They know. And some of those just bounce to you.
Yeah.
That was the crazy part.
I had that magnet in me.
So who, Robert, would you say then is on your Mount Rushmore of clutchness?
You know, I would have to go with the number 1 guy is MJ, of course. MJ, then I'll have to with Kobe. And this is a guy everybody always laughs at me about. But I put Reggie Miller on there for what he did in the last few moments of that New York Knicks game. So, because, and then, you know, I don't know that some guy who played in Houston, LA.
What's his name again?
Spurs.
Lots of rings.
Robert Horry. I put Robert Horry on there. Yeah, I put Robert Horry. You know, and in the close second, I have Dame right there. You know, when people push me off, put Dame on there. But for me, I'm going to pub myself. If you don't pub yourself,
no one else
will.
But you wanted to know who has confidence to take the last shot. There's your confidence.
Oh, no doubt. But again, look at the difference. All of those guys in their career, they had the ball in their hands full time, and they knew I'm either making or missing this shot. And so I always found it like interesting that guys like Robert, who may not have been on the first option.
Well, like he said, you're not. You might on certain teams you play. By the way, not on all teams, but on certain
Steve
teams.
Kerrs and guys like that who had to wait to get the ball. That's a tough spot to be in.
It's really harder. I didn't want to say it's really harder because you don't have a rhythm. Think about all these guys are playing with the rock. They get a rhythm, you know. And when you're not the first option or the second option during the course of a game, and you're just waiting to pick your turn, it's really hard and tough on you because you might not have a shot in like 10 minutes. But so you have to step up for the big moment.
And anyone out there who answered, no, I would want to be like that, I would be like, Robert, go test yourself one time. It is not easy at all. Let's talk about the Jazz because they beat the Celtics last night, 117-109. 6 Utah players scored in double digits. All 9 players in action scored at least 5. So, Fizz, as a coach, how much is that depth valuable? Do you think that will make the difference come playoff time? Or do you think we shorten benches so much, it's really more of a regular season stat?
Man, I think it's a great question, and I think it's just going to depend on matchups. I think a lot of it will depend on injuries and foul trouble, right? But you want to go into the situation like this. Right?
Better to have it and not need it.
Yeah, exactly. And so the question will be, can that overcome some of their matchup issues that they're going to face along their path?
Right.
The only team I really saw in recent history that really went deep and won the title was the old Toronto team. That Toronto team played 10, 11 guys consistently throughout. And the Jazz have that type of team. And so it'll be interesting to see if they can sustain it. But I think a lot of it is questionable and based on matchups and injuries.
You know, the pandemic has made team depth really important because you never know what's going to happen with the protocols or injuries and whatnot. So with them being deep like that, it helps out a lot. And also helps down the line because they're well rested. And so now you're looking at these teams that are like, okay, are they that good? It doesn't matter that they're good because when they come into the playoffs, they're going to be fresh. And that's the most important thing when you enter the playoffs, being fresh.
I think something else that's unique about the Jazz that's probably different for other teams is you can plug in all of the guys on their team into that system because Quinn has created such a beautiful basketball system, and it's going to work if you can dribble, pass, and shoot. And they've shown that they have multiple guys that can do that. If you look up and down their roster, all of those guys are skilled. can shoot the ball, can make plays for each other.
Well, that's interesting, right? Because that system has been most compared to your Spurs teams, Robert. And Jordan Clarkson, in some way, right, I'm sure reminds you of some of your teammates there.
Yes, he reminds me of Manu Ginobili guard mentality. He has a scorer mentality like Manu. And it's so funny how guys feel like it's a demotion if you don't start. It is not a demotion if you don't start. If you I say, if it's fourth quarter and it's clutch time, you in the game, you're more important than that starter.
No doubt.
And you have to look at it like that. And with Clarkson in the game, he brings the energy that's like no other. He's able to do what he wants to do at the court anytime, shooting threes, and he's learning as he go that I have to be a teammate to be successful, because when he was with the Lakers, it was kind of me. But now he's playing team basketball.
It's maturity, right?
Yeah, and he's in a culture of winning.
Yes.
So he's seeing, like, I have to sacrifice something to be a part of something better. So that's what you're seeing, and he's playing fantastic.
Well, you say, Robert, though, I wish more young players. I mean, look, you can't speed people up in terms of maturity or knowledge, but I wish more young players understood that, because they're the ones in those bench roles earlier in their careers. And guess what? You can score just as many points in minutes, 10 through whatever of a game as you can shoot in 1 through 5 or whatever. It's not like the baskets leave the court. They're there for those bench minutes too, and you can do some damage.
That's right.
All right, I do want to move on to a very different topic here. On Tuesday evening, a series of shootings at 3 Atlanta area massage parlors left 8 people dead. 6 of the victims were of Asian descent. 7 were women. Now, according to authorities, a 21-year-old man was captured last night after a manhunt. Although it's not clear whether there was a racial motivation in the shootings, it is hard not to make some connections. Stop AAPI Hate, formed to prevent anti-Asian discrimination during the coronavirus pandemic, called them, quote, an unspeakable tragedy for both the victims' families and an Asian American community that has been reeling from high levels of racist attacks. LeBron James responded to the shootings, tweeting, "My condolences go out to the families of all the victims, the entire Asian community tonight on what transpired in Atlanta. Coward young man, just senseless and tragic." Joseph Tsai, owner of the Brooklyn Nets, one of the co-founders of the Alibaba Group, a global internet technology company based in China, retweeted LeBron and added, "Thank you for speaking up for the Asian community." And Jeremy Lin, who recently said players called him coronavirus while on the court in the G League bubble, tweeted in part, quote, "To my Asian American family, thank you, Zion, make Pennywise, Knicks, Sixers, Emmanuel Quickley's float game on full display again." Rob, I mean, he's making the floater cool.
Man, the floater has always been cool. Just call up Tony Parker. Tony Parker at one time led the league with points in the paint because of this move, and he won 3 NBA championships like that.
Okay.
So score points in the paint any way you can.
Yeah, D-Wade say, here, take this flotation device because you're going to need it when that water splash.
I love it. Missed blocks, Thunder Bulls, Lauri Markkanen dropping the hammer. All right, you ready? Coach, do you like this finish? So you get the 2 ends because he's from Finland. Is that it?
Yeah, I like that. I heard a good toilet joke with finish in it. So this is a good one. I mean, it could go either way. I'm just saying. You know?
I appreciate that Michael Bobman, our producer, does make miss because he gets my sense of humor. Which is terrible. It's just absolutely corny and terrible.
It's not terrible.
There you go. Finish. Really? Yeah. I have 9-year-old children who wouldn't even laugh at that. Make bunnies. Hawks, Rockets, Kenyon Martin Jr. This is so fun. Just watching him play, enjoy himself, and boom, there he goes over the top of John Collins.
Hello.
So Kenyon Martin Sr., while speaking up, tweeted, "Junior jumps much higher than I ever could." Now, you played against him, Rob. Is he being modest or truthful?
Oh, he's being truthful because you watch his son is a little bit shorter.
Yeah.
And so if you look at the heads, they're almost by the rim. So the son got a little bit more bunnies. Kenyon, we saw you dunk on a lot of people, but your son got mega hops. You had good hops.
Man, when you're getting that high off the ground, I just don't understand any of it. So I don't think I have a say in this. Because I've seen Kenyon Martin 2-hand block people against the glass above the square.
That's all.
And it's like, but you see genetics definitely pass on.
Yes.
That kid is
well, if you would like to see for yourself, we will run it back for you.
Okay.
Kenyon Martin Sr.'s most savage slams. Here's 2002. The putback against the Knicks.
Oh, my. Oh, my, Kmart.
Hey,
Oh, my.
I love it when you pull the shirt on. That's the thing. Let them know I got some scruff.
Oh.
Number 4, 2002, dunks on Mount Matumbo.
Ooh, goodness.
It feels better when you get a dunk on someone like that, right?
I don't think people understand. He dunked that with 2 hands. Most guys block that, especially Mutombo.
Oh, Mutombo.
And then stare him down.
Woo, number
No,
3. Love seeing those Sonics colors on the floor.
I'm no good in this whole segment because I'm just in awe of
Right,
how many
I know,
people-
right?
He's climbing over people.
Over people, above people, and
So
look
Daddy
at
got hops.
grabs it out the air and then puts it in the other hand, 2-hand slam.
All right, 2002, the lob from Jason Kidd.
It's better ones than that. He got
You know,
he and Jake Kidd connected on
Hey,
I was going to say, you had to throw a J
no,
Kidd
but you got to understand. Look, there was a push with the body there, and he
did meet
still was
somebody.
able to dunk it. That
Yeah.
takes a lot of skill.
Number 1, 2002, off the backboard for the emphatic two-hander.
Him and Jake Kidd had a connection like
Yes,
no
they did.
other, boy.
Right?
That's a lot of dinners between those two right there. That's a lot of dinners.
Yeah, I think Kenyon should have paid if that's what Jason set him up.
Exactly right.
With those alley-oop
Games, people. Welcome back to The Jump. I'm Rachel Nichols. I'm alongside Robert Ory. I'm alongside David Fizdale. And not only are the Bucks on a roll, winning 9 of their last 10 going into tonight, the Sixers won their 6th straight last night over the Knicks, despite missing Joel Embiid as he recovers from a bruised knee. Now, Tobias Harris led Philly with 30 points. And after this bucket in the last 2 minutes, shouted out, "I'm an all-star!" Tobias and Doc explained why after the game.
That's for sure what I said. And for me, that's just reaffirming that to myself. I mean, I know the fans know that, but reaffirming that to them and to myself, especially making those big plays. I embrace all those challenges. What anybody has to say, you know, it doesn't really affect myself because I know when I look everyone in that locker room in the eye before the game, we're ready to go out there and win. So, yeah, that's where that emotion, and that is what I say, yep.
He is an all-star, in my opinion. And that's not a slight. I think whenever someone says that, they mean someone else isn't. Everyone's deserving who was on it. But Tobias is one as well. You know, I think Tobias wants to win more, but I still think he thinks he should have been on the all-star team, and I agree with that.
Tobias actually has never been an all-star, although he has come close in the voting and everything. He's max player, though. That's nice. Does he need that extra motivation of needing to say that kind of stuff to himself? What do you think?
I mean, if he feels that way, I can't get in his head. If he feels like he needs that to keep pushing himself forward, he doesn't need to tell us, though, because I think all of us understand that he is that talent of a player. You know, his situation is going to be a lot probably like Mike Conley. You know, one of those guys that's super talented, go through their career averaging big numbers, and at some point, he finds a way to break through, but it's only so many guys that can be on the team. But if he feels like he's got to scream that out to keep himself fueled, then go right ahead.
You need to. You know, it's all about self-motivation, self-confidence, and pubbing yourself.
Yep.
You know, for him, now he's telling everybody he's an all-star, so now everybody's like, oh,
On
next
alert.
year we got to look out for this kid. But we all expected Tobias to be this great athlete when he came to the league. He had the size, he had the shooting ability, he could do everything on the court, and he's been one of those guys. You know, he reminds me of Rudy Gay. He's always had that body. He's always had that skill set, but you bounce from team, and then you get to a team like here where you're not the first fiddle or the second fiddle, you're the third fiddle. So even though you got all-star caliber talent, are you being recognized like you should?
Well, Tobias is a great example to me of how sometimes we miss the nuance of basketball, right? So he is a guy who has excelled when he is in the right system with the right coach and been more of an average or slightly above average player when he isn't. And that is true for most of the players in the NBA. The top guys will always be the top guys. The guys who are just scraping the bottom will probably always be scraping the bottom. But most of the guys in the middle, fit is the answer.
Right.
And Tobias's numbers here show the fit that he has found once again with Doc Rivers and with the Sixers.
No doubt.
I do want to get to the late game because the Mavericks and Clippers meet for the second time in 3 nights. LA won in Dallas on Monday. Now, despite that loss, the Mavs have won 7 of 10. Kristaps Porzingis has averaged 22 and 10 so far in March. Dallas currently sits at 8th in the West race, right in the middle of that play-in zone. Now, remember, if you finish in the top 6, you get that nice break before the playoffs. If you finish 7 through 10, you have to play your way in. So the Mavs are currently 2.5 games behind Portland in that West 6th spot. We're going to be talking about it a lot in the second half of this season. Fizz, what do you think Dallas has to do the rest of the regular season to avoid the play-in games?
Focus on what's in front of them that day, right? Just take it a game at a time. Play your best basketball collectively. You know, treat every game almost like a playoff game.
That line.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. Do the playoff work now so you can get out of that situation for later. But I tell you what, if for some crazy reason they do end up in that situation, Wouldn't you like to have Luka Doncic?
Yeah. It's a good way to enter the playing games if you got to be there.
If you got to be there, wouldn't you want to have him with you? So I think the biggest thing is and Rick is going to do a great job of this, is just keeping them in the moment of taking it a step at a time. Again, you're seeing with Kristaps Porzingis on the floor what they can be. And so if they can just maintain health and just keep focusing in on getting better every day, they'll be fine because they got the talent.
That is a strong key word there, health, because we know Porzingis hasn't been the healthiest guy in the NBA, and he's the key to that team. He can do so many different things, stretch the defense, go inside and score, and the way that him and Doncic works together is fantastic because they've been playing together for years, but they've only been playing like one. So they have to stay healthy, they have to be smart about taking advantage of their opportunities. They cannot lose to any teams behind them because there are 3 teams trying to do exactly what they're trying to do. So they need to stay in position so they can rise to the occasion.
And you know those trade rumors that you might have heard about Kristaps Porzingis maybe a month ago, Mark Cuban has said the whole time, but then reiterated again yesterday on national television. They absolutely, positively are not going to trade Kristaps Porzingis.
I heard that once before, too.
Well, that's true, Robert Horry. It is true. And you were traded and then sent back, so you've had the gamut. Coming up, we're going to talk a little Miami. The Heat is 11 of 12. They are cooking. But is their hot streak a blip or a trend? We will discuss. Plus, here's what The Jump recommends. On ESPN Plus, Jackie McMullen profiling how Nuggets guard Jamal Murray fighting through the weight of growing expectations in Denver and how one meeting with Kobe Bryant changed